This is Rewilding, a series about reconnecting with the upsides of nature while maintaining modern living. Chapter 1 is all about movement.
In nature, when you see a large herd of animals, how many of them do you think are sick, broken, disabled? Maybe 1 in 100? The vast majority of them are optimized to their environment, not just to survive, but to thrive. But when we look at humans in the modern era, why is it that the majority of us seem to be burdened? Stress, hypertension, depression, anxiety, obesity, insomnia, cancer, diabetes, chronic backache, neck ache. The list just goes on and on. And most of us will suffer one or more of these things in our life. How have we lost this connection to optimal living? And so you have a choice. You can conform to modern solutions, or you can listen to your body and what it needs. What if one of these solutions was as simple as movement?
Movement. Think of movement first. Right? This is not primarily about fitness. It's not primarily about building muscle or losing weight. It's about movement. So for a bit of context, we can safely assume that the human body is made to move and needs movement. And one of the indicators of this is that we have very large brains. According to Daniel Wolpert, and it's not only him, but he's like kind of a spokesperson of this view, he basically says, look, the brain is made for complex movement. The reason organisms grow larger brains is to be able to do more complex movements in more complex environments. He has this great example of like a little, what is like some little sea squirt creature that has a very primitive, very simple central nervous system, so a very primitive brain. And it moves around until it finds like a place to latch onto. And it almost goes from animal to vegetable then, because it latches onto this place. And when it's found that place, like the first thing it does is it consumes its own brain for calories. Because it's like, oh, I'm never going to move again. I don't need this anymore. We developed these large brains in conjunction with movement, with complex movement through the world. And the phenomenon of not moving, like for most of your waking hours, is a recent phenomenon in human history. And this is extremely bad for us. The flip side of that is that, what are the benefits of movement? And again, let's think about not exercise, think about movement. Benefits of movement are like, okay, it improves your health and longevity. It basically has a positive effect on every risk factor you can name. It's like cardiovascular disease, hypertension, whatever, right? It also is good for your mental health. It's a really effective treatment for like anxiety and depression. It improves mood and mental health, it improves your skin, it improves your sexual health, it boosts your energy levels, etc., etc. There's almost no aspect of human well-being that more movement doesn't touch.
I don't want this to be just another inspirational video. Instead, I want this to be a short story about how movement has actually made my life better. But that doesn't mean we can't add in some music, and that we can't go out into the world and get some great fitting footage. Grabbing my camera and getting out of the office to film people is something I love doing. And the more movement I add into the experience, the better the final product will look and feel. This isn't something that I was taught. I didn't go to film school. It's just something that feels good. It was absolutely no surprise that all my career choices involve movement. I grew up in a family where movement and activity was part of the package. If we weren't walking out in nature or going surfing or even looking for places to ski in Africa, movement was just part of what we did. And through all this time, I didn't realize that I had taken it for granted. I'd taken movement for granted. It only occurred to me quite a few years later when I moved back to the city and started to stand still. I was strapped for cash, and so I took a job that I thought would set me financially free. And it was okay until I realized that I wasn't moving anymore. Not in my job, and not outside of my job either. My surfing turned into drinking with the buddies. I even started smoking during this time. I put on weight and I became terribly miserable. The end. No, I can't even tell you how many doctors I saw that year. Something was clearly missing in my life, but I couldn't put my finger on it until I started moving again.
The motivation to make a change came from a lack of job satisfaction. I thought it was just the job that was getting me down. And when I did move into a new line of work, things did get better. The dark cloud that was hanging over me was starting to dissipate. I felt like me again. I felt normal. Like crossing the river is just something that you do, not the end of life. So like a good video, I made sure to add in a bit of movement. And then later, as I became an entrepreneur, started building my own business, I found myself back behind a desk most of the time. And although there was some job satisfaction, it was mostly overpowered by insecurity of, is this project gonna work? Am I gonna make it? I just don't know if it's gonna work. And yet somehow I managed to keep going, despite all my insecurities about this new venture of my life. I never fell back into that dark space. And the reason for that was because I still had movement in my life, even if it was only 10 to 15% of the time. 90% of the time that I'm making a video, it happens here. In fact, all the important stuff about a business happen here. But it's these moments out here, even if it is only a short period of time, is what makes it all worthwhile. And so this is the point that I want to leave you with. I can't advise everybody in the world to quit their jobs and go get a more active career. But what I can advise is that you find a way to make movement part of your daily habits. Just something small that keeps you going, whether it's doing a few push-ups or sit-ups or some stretches next to your computer every so often, or if you go for a short walk after work every day. These little things add up, and they are the ticket to your sanity.
Dean has a very good point with that, and I would like to back him up with a book that I read called Spark, The Revolutionary New Science of Exercise and the Brain by a guy called John Ratey. Now, the main thing I learned from this book is that movement and intelligence, movement and brain power, movement and overall brain health are inextricably linked. And the way they're linked is through a set of proteins in the brain called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Now, a lot of people don't realize that you can actually grow new brain cells. As you continue to live and as you continue to perform new actions in the world, your brain is constantly growing new brain cells. They call this neurogenesis. Now, one of the things that aids and assists neurogenesis in the brain the most is the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And you want to know the one thing that boosts levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor in the brain? You might have guessed it by now, but it's movement. So if you want to improve your brain power, improve your intelligence, your cognitive abilities, your memory, your focus, your concentration, then there's one thing to do, and that is to get moving.
Let's end off with a motivational moment after all. I encourage you to seek out movement in your everyday life. The further you move, the further you can imagine to move. Never allow movement to become a chore. See it instead as a privilege of being a human being. In the rest of the series, we'll be looking at other aspects of rewilding Homo sapiens. Just getting that little bit more in touch with the wild humans that we are. To learn more about how and why to implement movement in your life, watch How to Get Your Shit Together Part 1, Upgrade Your Health and Fitness on the Icario podcast. All links to scientific research and supporting videos are available in the video description below or at icario.com/movement.